Okay. So nutrition is important because it really is the cornerstone of your athlete's performance. If they are not fed appropriately, they're not going to be able to perform at their best regardless. If they're not fed at all, they're not going to be able to perform at all. So it's really important to make sure that we have adequate nutrition. Now, this presentation, when it was originally written, was geared a little more towards pharmacists. That's why you're going to see that in there. But it's equally as important for other professionals in the healthcare industry and in the sports industry to have a good passing knowledge of this. Go ahead and advance it for me, please. All right. So we're going to start with hydration. Hydration is really important because even a 2% deficit of fluid in the body can cause dehydration. We're going to see decrease in performance, decrease in ability to think. We're going to see that your athlete is not going to be compliant with the things that you're asking. They're going to have higher blood pressure simply because as the amount of volume in our bodies of water decreases, we retain extra sodium to hold on to more fluid. That sodium causes our blood to thicken. As the blood thickens, the heart has to work harder. Anytime the heart is working harder, we're not going to be performing optimally. So we want to make sure that we are getting plenty of fluid to lubricate those joints, limit muscle fatigue, to make sure that they can think clearly and quickly make snap decisions like they need to on the field or court, and that they can maintain their body temperature, especially if they're an athlete that plays during a hot season here in the States. Please advance it for me. Thank you. So we want to make sure that they have a good hydration plan in advance. We want to make sure that they are hydrating before practices, they are hydrating throughout the day, and that they are hydrating afterwards. We also need to take into account what equipment they're wearing. So for example, an ice hockey player versus a soccer player is going to have very different hydration needs because they're not going to notice as well that those pads are soaking up that sweat. So they may not even know they're sweating. They're playing in a cold environment. They're wearing a lot of padding that's going to absorb that. And so we need to be aware that they may not notice those symptoms of dehydration as quickly as another athlete. So this is the chart that we use for hydration status. There are a lot of things we want to monitor clinically. However, if your athlete is already thirsty, they're already dehydrated. Once we start to experience that desire for liquid, we are already dehydrated. A lot of Americans also confuse thirst and hunger. So a lot of times we'll be thirsty and we think that we're hungry. So making sure that if an athlete is complaining that they're hungry, that we give them the drink first and then give them something to eat. Obviously, we want to feed them because they could actually be hungry, but we also want to make sure they're getting plenty of fluids, check and see how much they've had that day, things like that. If we're seeing weight loss, sunken appearing eyes, hypotension, lack of sweating, it's already too late. At that point, they're clinically in danger. So this is the chart. Hopefully we never see athletes in the bottom 3 bars. If we do, hopefully they're sitting in an ER instead of on your field or court. So as you can see, the top 3 bars are considered hydrated. We don't have to have clear urine to be considered properly hydrated. It does need to be light lemon colored or lighter. Obviously, first thing in the morning, it's going to be darker because they've gone without fluid for 8+ hours. So we want to make sure that we're staying within that chart. Can you advance it for me, please? All right. So timing of hydration. 2 to 3 hours before is when we ideally want to start their hydration plan. Obviously, we want them drinking throughout the day, especially if it's a night game or a night activity. But 2 to 3 hours before, we want to get 16 fluid ounces in. This is about your standard water bottle. 2/3 of a blender bottle. Most of your plastic water bottles are 24 ounces. 15 minutes before, we want another 8 ounces. Goal here is to make sure they're well hydrated, but not so hydrated that they need to urinate while they're playing, because that's obviously going to impede their performance, right? During exhaustion, we want 4 fluid ounces every 15 to 20 minutes. I tell my athletes, this is 2 to 3 big gulps. It doesn't have to be measured. They don't need to be looking at their bottle and trying to, exact that. But we do want to make sure they're getting some throughout. So depending on the sport, depending on the athlete, I tell them every time you come back to the bench, get in water. Every time you get a break, get in water. 16 to 20 fluid ounces for every pound lost afterwards. Ideally, our athletes are weighing themselves naked beforehand, weighing themselves naked afterwards, and replacing all the fluid lost. Doesn't always work that way. So we generally tell them just get 16 to 20 fluid ounces every couple of hours if that's easier, because a lot of them are not going to weigh themselves. All right, so we're going to talk a little about sports drinks. Powerade, Gatorade, huge market, right? See it everywhere. You see athletes drinking it when they don't need it. You see athletes drinking it when they do need it. So we're going to talk a little bit about when it's appropriate and why it was created. So they were created specifically for athletes. They contain sugar for a reason. I know we tend to villainize sugar, but the sugar that is in Gatorade and Powerade and other beverages that are similar, that are electrolyte replacements, does serve a purpose. Its goal is to replace fuel in a manner that doesn't require any breakdown. So it already is a combination of glucose and fructose. The body can consume 60 grams of glucose and 30 grams of fructose every hour during exercise. That is where we flood those glucose transporters, and we can't really absorb much more than that. So the sugars that are found in Gatorade and Powerade are meant to replace that fuel without turning on the GI system. If we start to digest something, the rest of the body kind of shuts down. Or it just sits there and just kind of causes some distress. We want to avoid that, right? Because we obviously don't want players who are sick on the field or court, and we obviously don't want them playing with an upset stomach.
What were those numbers again?
60 grams of glucose and 30 grams of fructose per hour. Yep.
And that keeps the GI tract from finding the metabolite in the gut.
So whether it be, sure, whether it be glucose or 30 grams of fructose or less, neither one turns on the digestive tract. They don't require breakdown. They're already in a form that we're going to use in the body. And so they're going to absorb very quickly into the bloodstream, and then they're going to absorb and be utilized immediately. So they'll replace that fuel. We only have about an hour's worth of stores in the body for exercise. That's why we need to keep replacing it after that. They do contain sodium, potassium, and chloride as well to make sure that we are rehydrating. So water is great, and I would never discourage my athletes from drinking water. But if they are a very salty sweater, they're playing in a very hot environment, or they're playing for longer than an hour, they need electrolyte replacement. Because water is great, but it has no mechanism to maintain itself. So it goes in, it goes out, right? Gatorade, Powerade go in. That salt helps us to retain the fluid. We're going to stay better hydrated for longer, even though we're sweating and we're putting some out. So I know we like to villainize Gatorade and Powerade, but they do serve a purpose for particular athletes, especially athletes who tend to boink, meaning that their blood sugars drop while they're playing. Either they're not well fueling ahead of time, they don't have a great fueling plan, or maybe they're on a weight loss plan, or they just have blood sugar issues. Those are the athletes who are going to benefit the most from these. Now, if they don't have those issues, Gatorade can be great for hydration, but let's go with Gatorade Free or Powerade Zero. They don't need the extra sugar, and so let's get those electrolytes in without the additional sugar, okay? Let's see. Again, how much they use is going to be dependent on their individual exertion. I don't recommend it for anything less than 60 minutes of exercise unless you do have a salty sweater. The way you're going to know these individuals is the inside of their jersey, groin of their shorts, armpits of their shirts are going to have a white flaky crust on it. That's basically salt that's been building up. It's not that they're doing anything wrong. It's not necessarily that they're dehydrated. You'll want to check. But if they're constantly like that, it's probably just the way their body is. Some of us just exert more sodium when we sweat than others. You can advance it for me. Thank you. All right, so supplementation brings in about $32 billion every year as a market. So it is huge, and that's why I'm here today to talk to you guys about this, because it does make a difference. There are some supplements that are considered safe, and we'll talk about how to know which brands, which flavors, because some submit for third-party testing. This market in particular is not required to go through FDA testing to prove safety. And so basically, not that they would, but they can put anything they want into their product. It could be an entire jar of baking soda, and they could tell you it was creatine, and you wouldn't know the difference. So we want to make sure that our athletes are using third-party tested, and we'll get to some resources at the end that you can utilize to assist them with that. But that way we assure that not only is the product what they say it is, but that the product contains no substances that are banned for their sport, so that they can continue to play and not be red carded for having something that they didn't know they had. So we have two classes of supplements. We have ergogenic, which are going to help to increase power and strength. They can also assist with reducing body fat, depends on how they act. And then our endurance aids, such as the sports drink that we talked about and caffeine, these are going to help to increase the length and duration of performance. They're going to give us additional fuel. All right, so we're going to start with the most common, protein powders. So protein powders have a couple of different types. If you've ever looked at the back of one, you'll see there's whey, there's casein, there's whey blends, there's isolates. As far as isolate versus blend, it's whatever goes best with your athlete's stomach and flavor preference. Isolates ideally are absorbed the fastest, but a blend can be beneficial at certain points in time too. So casein is the curds from milk. So if we coagulate milk, such as cottage cheese, those little lumps in cottage cheese are the casein. All right. Whey is that liquid. So you know when you rip open the top of cottage cheese, that liquid that's on the top, that's where whey comes from. We dry that out, powderize it, and then it becomes our whey powders. Whey is absorbed much, much faster because it's already broken down. Casein is a slower, long-term acting protein. So casein's job is best at night. At night while we're sleeping is when we do all of our muscle reparation, all of our muscle building. They're not going to build after exercise immediately. We're still actively burning calories then. So the body's still kind of breaking things down, starting to rebuild a little. I know we talk a lot about that golden time after working out. Ideally, we like to see athletes eat after working out only because we want to replace the stores. It's not so much about muscle building and that we have to get it done in this hour or it's not going to happen. It's more about just making sure that they have the energy and the fuel that they need to begin recovery, to feel appropriate afterwards, and to be ready to carry on with the rest of their day. Overnight, however, is when we're going to do all that repairing. So we want to make sure they're well fueled throughout the day. But a casein shake or a food high in casein right before bed can also help to repair muscle. So things like cottage cheese or a casein powder will help to do that. Yogurt can assist as well. So whey, on the other hand, is best for right before, right after, or during exercise because it is quick absorbing. Benefits are going to be that we get increased protein intake. As Americans, generally not an issue, but athletes have higher protein intakes than the average American. Some will meet it, some won't. When they're in college, especially, not going to meet it generally. Anyone know why? Two things: time and cooking skill. Not everybody knows how to prepare food. You know, we would think that that's a general basic skill, but it's not always true. So you'll find a lot of athletes coming into college may not have ever prepared their own food. Or they can make simple things like pasta, but they have no idea what to do with meat. And so they may not have the skills appropriate for cooking or making enough. Our time, they may not always have time going between classes to get those kind of foods in. They don't carry very well, for example. If they're not really thinking it through, they're not well educated, they may not know that there are proteins that they can carry with them that don't require heating, that can be eaten. It can help us to decrease fat mass and increase lean body mass. So as we build more muscle, we burn more calories. Our metabolism spikes, and so we're going to burn off more fat, and that's where that ability to decrease fat mass comes from. They do often contain digestive enzymes and are lactose-free, so if you have an individual who is lactose intolerant, they are likely to still be able to handle a casein away. Way more so than casein because casein is a little less broken down, but most of them now do contain digestive enzymes. There are a lot of other options if they cannot consume dairy at all, if they have an actual dairy allergy or have been found to not tolerate the powders. But do be aware that whey and casein carry the highest PDCAA score. So this score is the amount of protein digestibility. So how much of the different amino acids does it contain? Is it a perfect protein? So your perfect proteins are pretty much milk and eggs, okay? Anything outside of that, it's missing one or more of the amino acids required to make it a perfect protein. So pea, hemp, soy, rice, coconut, any of those protein powders, they're still going to get increased protein, but they're not going to get all the grams that are listed on the back because our body is not going to be able to absorb all of that. Does that make sense? Okay. So high doses, if you have an athlete who has kidney issues, is known to have kidney issues, has had a kidney transplant, let's not go with protein powders. Okay, let's try to get through food as much as possible. And we're going to probably keep their protein intake on the lower end of the scale just because it does put additional stress on the kidneys to digest protein. Again, we want to watch out for any contaminants or unnecessary chemicals, and they can get the same benefit from drinking milk. Now, the reason we recommend protein powder sometimes is that milk is not always the easiest thing to pack or carry with you. You know, if you're outside in a hot environment, you don't have a refrigerator or a cooler, milk's kind of gross when it gets a little warm. So, you know, it's not really something they're going to want to drink. Chocolate milk, banana milk, strawberry milk, I don't care what flavor you like it, is going to be a better option than white milk, though. Anyone know why? Yes. So because we flavor it, we add sugar to it. The sugar increases the carbohydrate content of the milk, so we get that nice 2-to-1 ratio of carb to protein that we like to see for athletes pre and post workout. So we're getting about 25 to 50 grams.
So you talked about the milk not being, easily accessible.
Sure.
Is there anything out there regarding like dehydrated milk, like powder milk?
Sure.
You find in the box?
Sure. So you can use powdered milk in the same way that you would a whey protein. I just find for athletes, a lot of times it's not something that's widely accepted flavor-wise. But there are a lot of shelf-stable milks coming out now. Hershey's just introduced a shelf-stable line that they'll be bringing out. So as we see those things kind of increase, I mean, we are one of the few countries that refrigerates our milk all the time and only drinks it cold and doesn't prefer it room temperature. So as we see those increase, it will become something that will be easier to pack and take with them as athletes. And since they're in nice juice boxes, I can even throw them in a bag. They're not going to get crushed or make a mess. So, right? So we went over a little bit about whey versus casein. Isolate, again, is the purest form. However, a blend can be beneficial because they're going to get immediate whey, but they're also going to get that benefit for a little longer afterwards. Casein is great before bedtime. It is better at breaking down and absorbing. The body is the protein from casein than from whey, and so it can be more beneficial, but again, it's not for use right after exercise. Plant-based, again, great for individuals with allergies. They are not complete proteins, so be aware that they are going to need to have something else, and they're not going to absorb it all. And generally, it does not have the concentration that would be found in your whey or casein as far as the grams go. So dollar for dollar, it tends to be a lot more expensive too. Please advance it for me. Thank you. So dosing is typically 10 to 30 grams per serving. A lot of athletes, especially strength-based athletes, will tend to do 2, 3, 4 scoops at a time. This is very unnecessary. The body can't absorb much more than 30 to 60 grams of protein in one sitting. So drinking a shake that's got 90 plus is not going to be beneficial. It's just a waste of additional protein. So typically 1 scoop is more than sufficient regardless of the size of the athlete. So next we're going to talk about creatine. So creatine is widely known. It is one of the most highly studied supplements. It is also considered a gold standard. Now for athletes under the age of 18, I would never recommend creatine. Simply because creatine can affect growth. It can affect growth hormones. So we want to limit it for children under the age of 18. Plus, they already have enough growth hormone factor pumping through their body that they really don't need something to help them build more muscle. They're already doing it on their own. So it can be made by our bodies. The liver, pancreas, and kidneys can make it. So it's considered conditionally essential. It's not essential in that we can make it ourselves. It is present in most of our meats and a great majority of the supplements. Even protein powders are adding it now. You'll find it in pre-workouts. You'll find it in testosterone boosters. It's pretty much everywhere. It is converted and stored by the muscles where we do use it for energy. It is known because it helps to build muscle, and it's beneficial for athletes specifically who use short bursts of speed. So your power, your strength, your sprinters, your soccer players, those kind of athletes, people who are stop and go. So it does show, especially in jumping height, soccer performance, rowing benefits. It can improve especially upper body strength in older adults as well. And so we're finding that it's becoming highly studied for increasing muscle mass as we age, because we tend to lose muscle mass naturally as we get older. So there's a lot of studies coming out that way. Your endurance athletes or those who are weight-based, it is less beneficial for. It can contribute to weight gain. It also requires that we take in additional fluids. So we would never recommend it for an athlete who is dehydrated because it's going to dehydrate them further. We want to make sure that they are taking in an additional 8 ounces for every 5 grams taken in, okay, of creatine. There are children who have rare creatine metabolism syndromes, and we do utilize it for them as well. They're looking into it for fibromyalgia, diabetes, aging of the skin. They're finding that if it's put on as a cream. It can reduce wrinkles, sagging, sun damage even. So there's a lot of new research that we're doing on creatine that we'll see coming out in the future. All right, so it is taken orally, typically found in a powder. Taking it in a pill form doesn't really help, so the capsule kind of slows down the absorption. It, again, does require additional fluid. It does not require a loading phase, however. You can load with it, but it is not required. It's considered generally recognized as safe, meaning that it is not a banned substance. It's not going to do significant damage to the human body. However, it may still contain banned substances, something that's flavoring it, something they've put in for other reasons. So being aware of that. If they are exercising in a heated environment, they also need to increase that fluid to 16 ounces for every 5 grams, okay? The ideal dosage is 5 grams per day. We want to watch out for cramping, nausea, diarrhea, dizziness, gastrointestinal pain. These are things we'd want to watch out for anyways, but they can be attributed to creatine. High doses are not more beneficial. So this is a case of where more is not better. It can result in some damage to the GI tract, so we want to avoid that. And again, kidney issues, diabetes, bipolar, we want to avoid. The reason for individuals with diabetes is because of the increase in blood volume can decrease their blood sugars. So what they think they've got nicely controlled suddenly may not be controlled anymore. The bipolar disorder, it can actually affect their medications and increase mania. So being aware of that, and we do not use it in pregnant women or women who are actively trying to become pregnant. There are some drug interactions with it. Mainly want you to pay attention to the caffeine and the NSAIDs here. NSAIDs are typically used for decreasing inflammation, so we'll see athletes who have an injury might be using these. So it can interact with those. And caffeine, it can actually reduce the efficacy of the creatine. Or in individuals who actually have heart issues and don't know they have them, this is why we also don't recommend caffeine and alcohol mixed together. It can actually cause a stroke. So being aware of those kind of things. So generally, if an athlete is using creatine, I do not recommend caffeine as a pre-workout at all. All right, so dosing. For adults, again, loading phase is not mandatory, but some will use it, and if they do, it should be 20 grams daily for 4 to 7 days. After that, we need to drop that dosage. We don't want to go any more than 7 days at 20 grams because we don't want to put additional stress on the body. For muscle strength, again, you can dose it. 27 is the absolute highest daily, but at 27 grams, they typically recommend no more than a year's worth of constant usage, okay? Children, again, you can see the dosage here, but again, for athletes under the age of 18, it's not recommended. This would be a child who has an issue with creatine metabolism. All right, so next we're going to talk about beta-alanine. So beta-alanine has an interesting side effect. It can cause a little bit of tingling. In the extremities, it can also cause some itching and red rashes. So be aware if you have an athlete taking it and those are the things you're seeing, that may be what's going on. It is a modified version of the amino acid alanine. So it is one of the building blocks of protein. It is non-essential in that our body does not need it, but we do store it in the brain and muscles, and it can help to reduce fatigue. That means that it can help us to enhance our muscular endurance. So how long your athlete can push without having the same feeling of exertion. So it is used when the muscles contract. It impairs the ability of them to keep contracting if it builds up too much. And so this helps to clear out that carnosine for us. So why don't we just take it in the form that we're trying to utilize? Well, because it doesn't absorb very well. So we have to take it as beta-alanine, then it breaks down to carnosine, and then it does its job. Advance it for me. So dosing for this is 2 to 5 grams. It does need to be consumed with a meal, and it is not timing dependent. Now, this is not necessarily beneficial. It can be used. It's one of those things that gives you that little extra edge, but the question is how much extra edge at this point. So again, if you have an athlete who's at the very top of their game and needs a little extra edge, maybe it's worth trying. It's generally recognized as safe. It's not going to cause any damage other than the tingling. It does clear out of the system, and so it doesn't build up. But this is one of those supplements where we begin to question, where's the trade-off? We're putting something into our body that's man-made versus getting a little extra edge in performance. So our average athlete beta-alanine is not going to be a huge benefit for. All right, glutamine is next. So glutamine is the most abundant amino acid in the body. We have plenty of it there. It is conditionally essential. The only times it is really essential is if we are critically injured, whether it be hurt or sick, especially in the case of burn victims. So this is essential in individuals where we see high catabolism, so breakdown of muscle, and high physical stress. For athletes, it can be considered semi-essential because decreased amounts of glutamine in the body can impair performance. So if they are already potentially at a deficit or they are putting a lot of stress on their body, let's say they're doing 2-a-days, that's where we're going to see a benefit here, okay? We can synthesize it, but a lot of times for individuals who are active or who are prolonged, so in the case of an endurance athlete, we're going to outpace the body's ability to create that, and so we need to take in additional. So those who exceed greater than 2 hours or your endurance athletes are going to be the benefit here. It doesn't affect body composition. It doesn't assist in body muscle building. It simply increases our ability to work longer, decreases that exertion. So ingestion of glutamine with animal protein can help to alleviate symptoms. If it's consumed with carbohydrates, it can increase glycogen replacement faster, and glycogen is the form of glucose that is stored in the muscles that we use when we're active. So it tends to be dosed at 5 grams or above, with higher dosing not being advised, because it does increase the amount of ammonia found in our bloodstream. So we want to avoid that. It doesn't increase muscle mass, like I said, so we have no idea what the individual's optimal dosing is. There isn't one at this point. The studies haven't gotten that far. Sticking to 0.75 grams per kilogram or 5 grams seems to give us a beneficial edge without causing any damage in the body, and so that's just kind of where they leave it at this point until further studies are completed. Like I said, again, endurance athletes, those exercising more than 2 hours are the only ones we're going to see benefits for here. All right, branched chain amino acids. I'm sure you guys have seen these and or been asked plenty of questions about them. So these are leucine, isoleucine, and valine, the 3 amino acids known to be most involved in muscle building. So we get these from all of our foods. It's not something that we necessarily need to take. If you have an athlete who is consuming adequate protein through their oral diet, they're probably not going to get additional benefit from this. If it gets them to drink water, great, let's do it. It's not going to cause any damage. It can promote muscle synthesis and growth in those who aren't getting enough protein. It can decrease muscle soreness, can reduce exercise fatigue. But again, these are all things that protein through the diet can do as well. So if we have an athlete who's not getting enough protein, generally we recommend protein powder first, then branched chain amino acids. This is very rarely ever recommended from a dietitian standpoint, just because of the fact that you're kind of throwing away the money. I mean, if you're eating adequate protein and you're getting protein powder on top of that, we're meeting your needs through the 2 of those, which are the most bioavailable, meaning we break them down and absorb them the best. This is going to just kind of be extra. But again, if we're flavoring water with it, you could do a lot worse. So, all right. Dosing is 65 milligrams per pound of body weight per day. Women, minimum of 9 grams per day, men 12. Most people take in 5 to 12. That would be 1 to 2 scoops for most. 10 to 20 grams per day can be beneficial if they're not getting enough protein through other sources. It's safe with minimal side effects. The only exceptions to that would be individuals who have ALS or maple syrup urine disease. Maple syrup urine disease is very, very, very uncommon anymore, so we're not going to see that very often. But even people with a family history of ALS would need to avoid this as well. All right, nitric oxide. So supplements don't usually contain nitric oxide itself because it's a gas. So we have to use L-arginine, L-citrulline, or L-orthanine to increase nitric oxide in the body. So when a substance says it's a nitric oxide booster, that is what it's containing. The potential benefits are here that it's going to increase blood flow to the muscles, allowing them to repair faster, decrease soreness, improve function. There are a variety of different ways to take it. There are lots of other things that can help to do that as well. So oral arginine, arginine is found in our protein powders and our branched chain amino acids and our foods. So we're already kind of getting it that way. Could you advance for me? So dosing, L-arginine is the most common found one. It is going to be found typically in a dose of 3 grams per serving. Again, it's generally considered safe. And anything above 10 grams, though, can cause GI distress or diarrhea. Again, things we want to avoid in athletes. So never more than 10 grams. Whether your athlete takes it, again, is really if we're looking for an additional edge. As a dietitian, I would probably never recommend this just because there are a lot of medications that thin and thicken the blood. And if we're putting them on something that increases blood flow as well and they're on a blood thinner, we could be running a lot of additional issues. So just because there are a lot of potentials for medicinal interactions, it would not be something that I would generally recommend. But it is out there and you'll probably get questions about it. So testosterone boosters are next. So these are herbal supplements. A lot of times these are not going to be third-party tested. They don't require FDA testing, and a lot of times they're not going to submit for third-party testing. They usually contain micronutrients such as zinc that typically we're going to find is deficient. They're considered adaptogens, meaning that they allow the body to adapt to stress. There are a lot of other types of adaptogens that we could give athletes if they're having issues with stress, L-theanine being one of them that has no side effects. The ingredients are connected to improvements in sleep, which we found that improvements in sleep will increase testosterone naturally anyways. So if you have an athlete who is concerned about testosterone, let's check and see if they're getting 8 full hours first. If they're not getting 8 full hours, then we probably need to look at what can we do to improve their sleep first. How do we improve those sleep habits? Do we set a bedtime and a wake-up time? We keep it consistent all week long. Do we, set a routine? We turn off all blue lights, those kind of things. So starting there before we turn to something like this, they can increase serum testosterone levels through endogenous conversion. They can allow for fast recovery, increased muscle size and strength. But again, these are all things that increased testosterone would do anyways. It doesn't have a huge effect in humans that we know of, and so far the studied effect in rats and other animals has been minimal. So, all right. So some of the supplements we use for weight management, especially if you work with athletes who are in a weight-dependent sport. Diuretics. Rather than using diuretics or fluid balance adjustments, we prefer to see weight-oriented athletes setting a goal, working towards it during the off season so that they're closer to it by the time we get in season and we don't have to work so hard to take weight off, or adjusting their class, which I know is difficult to talk your athletes into. But diuretics, they're purported to cause weight loss. They will, but they do it through loss of fluid. Once we resume normal intake of food, normal intake of fluid, the weight's going to come back on. We're also running the risk of hypernatremia, so increased sodium in the blood, again, putting additional stress on the heart because that blood is thicker. And we are also putting ourselves at a risk for electrolyte imbalance. As we are decreasing the fluid, we're losing some of those electrolytes with it. So they need to be monitored for those kind of things to make sure that we aren't causing any issues with the heart, we aren't causing any issues with the brain because we don't have enough. And when they're losing electrolytes, we're going to see more cramping. We're going to see more issues with muscle contraction as well because the electrolytes' job is to help muscles contract. That's how they help the heart work. All right. So determining safety of our supplements. Again, they're not overseen by the FDA. They do not require any form of submission for testing. So auditing is completely voluntary. A lot of companies will do so. So NSF is the company you will see most frequently in the United States. Informed choice, you may hear if you're working with athletes who are international students because they will have seen that more in other countries. They tend to do more of the third-party testing for them. We may see substances, especially SARMs. SARMs are being seen a lot in things, and right now they're not considered safe for sports. So third-party testing is done by both of these, and these are the labels that you will see on the product. So NSF has a couple of different labels. So they have just the NSF label that does not have the certified sport for the bottom. For your athletes, we want to make sure they are choosing one that has the certified sport addition to it, because just the NSF tag says it's safe for human consumption. It does not say it is safe for athlete consumption, okay? Meaning that it may still contain something that is banned for sport. Informed choice is always going to mean that it's going to be safe for your athlete. NSF here in the United States does have a really great app that your athletes can use. And if you just search NSF in any of the app stores, you can pull it up and they can literally go into a store and scan the product. Their site is fabulous because it does list every product they test as well as every flavor, because some flavors will contain different things than others. So you can literally pull up, I'm going to say muscle milk. It's not my favorite supplement. I know people like the way it tastes, but it's got some things as a dietitian that aren't ideal. But you can type in muscle milk, chocolate ready to drink, and it will literally pull it up. You can see it. You can just type in muscle milk, and it will pull up every product they make that they've submitted for third-party testing. If they go through NSF or informed choice, testing is very rigorous. It's actually more rigorous than the FDA does for our food supply. So you can trust that the supplements are actually healthier than probably some of our food. So they actually have 3 testings a year plus random testings throughout the year where they come in, they test all of the products that are on the line. They also go through the entire building and check the line itself to make sure that there's no contamination on the line. So if it's carrying either one of these labels, you can rest assured that your athlete is going to be completely safe. All right? So these were the resources that were used. This is the NSF site as well as the Informed Choice site. Both of them have areas you can search. And not only can you search sports supplements, but you can search herbal supplements as well. There are some that will submit for third-party testing. So if your athlete is taking something you have questions about, you can utilize that. Examine.com is fabulous because Examine.com has a list of pretty much everything. So they go through all of the research that's out there. That's all they do is go through research all day long on all the different topics. And they give you a really nice layout of what it's purported to do, what the usage is, what the safe dosages are, and then it grades the research for each topic that it's covering. So it's a really great site to use if you have questions about things and you don't have access to a dietitian. It's also just really great in case your athletes have questions as well. So, and if I'm right, that brings us to the conclusion. So, any questions for me?
You said you didn't like muscle milk.
Yeah.
That's what we stock. What are some other alternatives that are also price efficient?
Okay. So the reason I don't like muscle milk as a dietitian is that it has higher levels of arsenic in it. Now, all of your supplements to some degree are going to contain arsenic because our protein supply, it naturally occurs in our protein supply. So I know there was a lot out there about arsenic for a while, but muscle milk has a higher quantity. It really depends on your contracts what's going to be cost efficient. But so muscle milk or Gatorade are our options? Yep. I'd stick with the muscle milk. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's not that I would not encourage it. If it's what you've got, I'd still encourage it as an option. More so for male athletes than female athletes because the arsenic will build up faster and your athletes are generally going to be of childbearing age and that can poison a fetus in the eventual. If they're taking it as safely recommended doses, they're not utilizing it excessively, there's no evidence at this point that it's not considered safe. It's just not preferential. Does that make sense? So yeah, I wouldn't say that you need to stop serving it. The trade-offs are much more beneficial that we're still getting the protein, we're still getting vitamins and minerals from it. We're still going to get the muscle building and carbohydrate versus. The nice thing about muscle milk is though it does have a higher carbohydrate content than a lot, so we're actually getting closer to that one than we do a lot of protein powders. Because a lot of protein powders are going to have to add an additional carbohydrate to in order to get that ideal ratio. So either they're going to need to eat a banana on the side or they're going to need to add, juice or something to it. Anything else?
I think there's Accelerate. If you know much about Accelerate, is it like the counter to Gatorade, but it has a protein
Yeah, so there are,
Whey in that, I'm imagining.
yes, they are using whey. There are a lot of hydration supplements, let's call them that, that are now trying to branch into both arenas. The problem with that is that we don't need that much whey. We need more of the electrolytes and fluid and the sugar than we do the whey. And if we're consuming it pre or during workout, it's actually slowing down the absorption. So carbohydrates themselves absorb very, very quickly. That's why the sugar in Gatorade and substances like that is there. Protein and fat slow down absorption. That's why with blood sugar issues, we generally encourage never eating carbohydrates without protein or fat. So they require a little more digestion. So as they get into the stomach, they kind of slow things down before they get digested. With them, they slow down anything else that's consumed. So if we're trying to utilize that as a blood sugar stabilizer or a fuel during workout, it's not going to be a benefit. No. Afterwards, for replacement, sure. You know, we can use that for recovery. We can use it to replace hydration that we lost. But if we're looking for hydration during or before exercise, we should be using something that doesn't contain whey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, until after. Yep. Yep. During, we want to look more towards goos, gels, liquids, even candy. Gummy bears. Gummies are chewy candies that are pure sugar, are going to be beneficial as well if they settle well in their stomach. I always tell my athletes, you know, just a small palm of their hand, they don't need a lot. Honey sticks, anything like that's literally going to be pure sugar because we want that fuel to get in and be absorbed immediately for use. And we want it to be something that's not going to turn on the GI tract. Fat, protein, or carbs. Yeah, at least 60 grams of glucose. The fructose is just an additional. So it really depends on the size of your athlete, how far they're going, how hard they're pushing, if they need that additional fructose. But that is maxing out those transporters. So that is the max amount of sugar, if you will, that we can take in per hour as an athlete and have it digest with no problems. You're welcome. Anything else? No?
I learned something very interesting. I wish I would have known having went through your presentation before I got to high school. The reason I say that is because going in 9th grade, I was 5'6", noticing I was going 2 inches every day. Well, back then, and it was popular, everyone was taking creatine.
Yeah.
I've noticed since then, I've grown an inch. So that could be a contributing factor as well as my parents' height, but still.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you guys for attending. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your presentations.